I stood there in the ancient St. Mary's Church on the outskirts of Chicago, where the faint autumn sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns on the cold stone floor. I am Julian Ross, 31 years old, a corporate strategy analyst living a regimented life filled with spreadsheets and reports. But today, everything had come to a halt. My grandfather, Norman Ross, the man who had built the Ross steel and logistics empire from nothing, the pillar of our entire family, had passed away. The pain inside me was not torrents of tears, but a hollow emptiness, as if a part of my soul had been torn away. I gazed at the polished oak coffin placed in the center of the church and wondered whether his life had truly ended like this, or if there were still secrets waiting to be revealed. The atmosphere of the funeral was oppressively heavy. The polished wooden pews were packed with relatives. From close family members to distant cousins I had only met a few times in my life. Business partners, the titans of the steel and logistics industry, bowed their heads silently in farewell. Senior company employees, those who had been loyal to my grandfather for decades, stood at the back, their faces etched with hardship under the flickering candlelight. This was not just a funeral. It was a ceremony steeped in power where grief intertwined with discreet handshakes and whispered discussions about the future of the corporation. I could sense the artificiality of it all, but there was nothing I could do. My grandfather had lived like a king, and now he was departing in the same manner. My parents, Alan and Susan Ross, sat in the front row right beside the coffin. My father, in his perfectly tailored black suit, wore a stern expression as if attending a board meeting. He did not cry or tremble. He simply kept glancing around, ensuring everything proceeded smoothly without a single flaw. My mother sat ramrod straight, a pristine white handkerchief resting on her lap. But her eyes were cold, more focused on appearances than genuine emotion. I knew what she was thinking. Don't let anyone ruin this ceremony. That was how my parents always were, treating the family like a corporation where everything had to be tightly controlled. The service was underway. The priest recited prayers, his warm, resonant voice echoing off the stone walls. I tried to focus, but my mind wandered to memories of my grandfather. He had taught me how to read financial reports when I was just 10 years old, and told stories of his early entrepreneurial days, when he had only an old truck and big dreams. "Julian, life isn't always fair," he used to say, "but how you treat others, that's your true legacy." I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the surging sorrow. Then suddenly, like an out-of-place gust of wind, the heavy church doors creaked open. All eyes turned toward the sound. An elderly man appeared, gaunt, dressed in patched and worn clothes, his white hair disheveled under a threadbare wool cap. He stood at the threshold, his clouded eyes peering inside, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, everyone. I just wanted to pay my final respects to Mr. Norman Ross. He was an old friend of mine." My heart tightened. The sudden silence was shattered. My father shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "Who are you? How dare you come in here?" he shouted, his voice thundering. "This is the Ross family funeral, not a place for vagrants. Did you come to beg for money? Get out. Don't defile this place." My mother did not stand, but her gaze was razor-sharp, scanning the old man from head to toe. She said to those nearby, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Disgusting. How dare someone like that show up here? Where's security? Get him out." The rest of the family quickly joined in like a pack of wolves. Uncle Gregory, my father's younger brother, sneered. "Oh, he probably thought this was a charity event." "Sorry, sir. We don't have spare change today." Aunt Susan, my father's sister, signaled the security guards at the door. "Please remove him before someone takes a photo and posts it on social media. The family's reputation cannot be tarnished like this." My cousins whispered and giggled. "Look at him, he must be starving." But today's not the day for handouts. The old man bowed his head, his thin shoulders trembling under his threadbare coat. He did not argue. He only gazed deeply into the church one last time, as if trying to memorize the sight of the coffin. Then he turned to leave silently, his steps slow. My heart wrenched. There was something about this old man, his eyes, his demeanor, that felt familiar, even though I had never met him. Memories of my grandfather and his teachings about how to treat others flooded back. I could not let this happen. I stepped out of my pew and called for the old man to stop, my voice calm but firm, cutting through the barrage of insults. Everyone stared at me in shock. This is my grandfather's funeral, and no one has the right to decide who may stay or leave. He only wants to pay his respects. That is his right. My father whipped around, eyes blazing. Julian, what do you think you're doing? Do you realize how many business partners are sitting in there? Don't turn your grandfather's funeral into a farce. Let him go immediately. I ignored him and approached the old man. I'm Julian Ross, Norman's grandson, I said gently. What's your name? How did you know my grandfather? The old man gave a faint smile, his demeanor strangely composed. I'm Peter Ross, and I was a friend of Norman's from a very long time ago. Peter Ross? The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I nodded without pressing further. Please come to the waiting room. It's quieter there. I led him away, ignoring the stunned stares and judgmental whispers behind me. My mother hissed sharply, Julian, what are you doing? This is an insult to our family. I did not look back. In the small waiting room behind the church, I bought a sandwich and a bottle of water from the vending machine. Rest here. I'll return after the funeral ends. He nodded, saying little, but a strange feeling stirred inside me, as if my grandfather were whispering something from beyond. The funeral continued, but the atmosphere was now more tense than ever. People looked at me strangely, as if I had betrayed the family. I sat there, listening to the prayers, but my mind was with the old man. Why did he share the surname Ross? That question made my heart beat faster, a mix of excitement and unease. When everyone had left and the church grew quiet, I returned to the waiting room. Peter was still there, the water bottle only half empty. Are you all right? We can go to the cemetery to visit my grandfather's grave now if you'd like. He nodded and we walked along the stone path to the cemetery behind the church. The air was chilly. A light wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth. It was just the two of us beside my grandfather's grave, the new headstone engraved with Norman Ross gleaming in the fading afternoon light. Peter gazed at the grave, his voice low. Norman and I, we shared a very close bond. Not just friends, but more than that. I froze. My heart pounded as if a door to the past had just creaked open. What do you mean? What exactly was your relationship with my grandfather? I asked urgently. Peter smiled sadly. You'll know soon enough, Julian. But not yet. Anxiety surged within me, making the world around me blur. Today's funeral was not just an ending, it was the beginning of a far greater secret. We stood there in front of my grandfather's grave, two strangers drawn together by an invisible thread. I looked at Peter, the weary old man, and wondered what was going through his mind. As for me, my thoughts were in turmoil. We said nothing more, just stood in silence, each lost in our own stream of thoughts. The cemetery air was heavy, carrying an indescribable weight, part regret, part curiosity, part fear of what was to come. The afternoon was fading, the weak sunlight gradually dimmed, casting a reddish hue over the surrounding trees. A cold wind rose, sweeping through the empty cemetery, bringing the scent of damp earth and withered leaves. I felt the chills seep into my skin through my thin suit jacket. The cemetery now had only a few scattered figures in the distance. The mournful cries of sparrows echoed like a lament at day's end. Peter stood beside me, his shoulders hunched, and suddenly he began coughing harshly. The dry, rasping cough echoed in the quiet space, startling me. He braced his hands on his knees, his body trembling as he tried to steady himself. His face was pale, the deep wrinkles more pronounced in the fading light. It was clear his health was failing, perhaps the result of years wandering, enduring the elements. Are you all right? You don't look well, I asked, concern in my voice, stepping closer to support him. Peter waved his hand, forcing a smile. I'm fine, Julian. Just old age. I should go now. Thank you for today. He bid farewell, his voice weak but resolute, then turned to leave. His stooped back and slow, shuffling steps on the gravel path looked so lonely in the vast cemetery. Dusk was approaching. Shadows were lengthening, and I suddenly realized this old man had nowhere to go. No home, no family. Just the cold wind and the coming night awaiting him. The thought twisted my heart. My grandfather had once spoken of old friends who had lost everything yet retained their dignity. Could Peter be one of them? I couldn't let him leave like this. Without further thought, I ran after him, my shoes crunching loudly on the gravel. Peter, please wait a moment, I called, my voice carrying on the wind. He stopped and turned, his clouded eyes looking at me in surprise. Do you need something else? I was breathless, stopping in front of him. You can't leave like this. It's getting dark and you're not well. Let me help. Come stay at my place, at least until you feel better. It's the least I can do. Peter shook his head, a sad smile returning. Thank you, but there's no need. I don't want to trouble anyone. I've been used to this life for a long time, wandering, free. One night outdoors is nothing. I persisted, gently grasping his sleeve, feeling the worn fabric under my fingers. This isn't pity, Peter. It's respect. You said you shared a deep bond with my grandfather, so you were his friend, and I can't abandon my grandfather's friend in this state, especially right after his passing. Think of Norman. He wouldn't want this. He was silent for a while, his eyes gazing distantly toward the grave. The cold wind continued to blow, now carrying a light drizzle that made the air even more biting. I waited, my heart racing, wondering if he would refuse again. Finally, moved by my sincerity, Peter nodded. All right, Julian. Just temporarily, okay? I don't want to owe you anything. I exhaled in relief and smiled. Thank you. Let's go, my car is parked nearby. We walked back to the parking lot. His steps were still slow, but now I was beside him. On the drive home, the car rolled through the familiar streets of Chicago as streetlights began to glow, reflecting on the wet pavement. My home was a small apartment in the city center, not luxurious like the Ross family mansion, but cozy enough for a single person like me. I led Peter inside, turned on the lights, and pointed to the living room. You can rest here. I'll prepare some bedding. Would you like something to eat? I can order takeout. Peter sat on the sofa and sighed. Just some warm water is enough. Thank you. The days we lived together afterward were simple yet warm, like a calm river after a storm. On the first day, I took Peter to a nearby store and bought him a few sets of simple clothes, fitting and warm. Nothing fancy but clean and decent. He hesitated at first, but eventually let me choose silently, his eyes showing a mix of weariness and gratitude. Every morning I woke early, brewed coffee for both of us, and we sat facing each other at the small kitchen table. At first, Peter spoke little, only answering when I asked, but gradually he opened up more. I told him about my work, the long days analyzing corporate strategies, the dry but powerful numbers. Peter listened attentively, his eyes lighting up whenever I mentioned business, as if old memories were quietly resurfacing. One evening, after a simple dinner of sandwiches and salad, we sat on the balcony watching the traffic below. Peter, what did you do before you started wandering like this? I asked, curious but keeping my tone gentle. He chuckled softly, sipping his tea. Oh, Julian, I was once in the business world just like you. Long-term strategies, people, markets, I knew it all. But then I realized money isn't everything. Sometimes you only see clearly when you've lost it all. I was surprised. You have deep knowledge. Could you give me some advice? My company is facing issues with market expansion. Peter nodded, and from then on, long conversations began. He analyzed the economy, how to read people in negotiations, long-term strategies for building trust rather than short-term profits. His knowledge wasn't from books, it came from real experience, full of vivid stories. You see, Julian, a strong company isn't built on money but on people. Your grandfather understood that, though not everyone grasped it. I listened, mentally taking notes, and gradually realized Peter was no ordinary homeless man. He had sharp intellect and profound insights into business and life. Those evenings made me feel warm, as if I had a family member beside me after losing my grandfather. But mixed in was anxiety. He still hadn't fully revealed his relationship with Norman. Whenever I tried to ask, he skillfully changed the subject, making me even more curious. One night, as rain pattered against the window, we sat by the faux fireplace. Peter spoke of his wandering years. I once had everything, you know, but I chose to leave it. Life taught me that true connection isn't from blood, but from mutual respect. His words made me reflect. A subtle bond was forming within me, as if this relationship had been arranged by my grandfather long ago. He had once said, "Julian, sometimes life brings the people you need into your path." Was Peter that person? I lay in bed listening to his faint cough from the living room and wondered when the secret would be revealed. That anxiety made my sleep restless, like waiting for an approaching storm. The following days passed in a fragile peace, but my curiosity grew steadily. I tried not to press him with questions, fearing it would make Peter uncomfortable, but every conversation felt like a puzzle piece, revealing a little more about his past. He spoke of his wandering journeys through various cities and the people he had met, from successful businessmen to fellow wanderers like himself. "Life teaches us a lot, Julian," he said one afternoon as we sat by the window watching the rain patter down. "Sometimes we have to lose everything to find ourselves." His words resonated, reminding me of my grandfather, who always emphasized the value of people over money. I began to feel as though Peter was a bridge to my grandfather, a part of his legacy I had never known. Then a week after the funeral, the phone rang in the quiet apartment. I was brewing morning coffee, the warm aroma filling the air, when the lawyer called. "Mr. Julian Ross, this is from Hargrove Law Office. The reading of Mr. Norman Ross's will is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at our office in downtown Chicago. All family members are required to attend." His voice was dry and professional, like reading a financial report. I confirmed I would be there and hung up. My heart beat faster. The will. This was when everything would become clear, when the true face of the Ross family would be revealed. I knew my parents, my uncles and aunts. They were all eagerly awaiting their share of the inheritance, like vultures circling prey. And me? I just wanted to know what my grandfather thought of me, of the company's future. I told Peter about it over breakfast. He sat across from me, holding his teacup, listening without interrupting. "So tomorrow you go," he said calmly. I nodded, trying to hide my anxiety. "It'll probably be tense. My family, they're not easy to deal with." Peter just smiled, saying nothing more. I felt relieved having him there, like a quiet anchor amid the family storm. That morning I woke earlier than usual. The weak autumn sunlight filtered through the curtains, shining on the polished wooden floor. I put on a black suit, tied my tie, and looked at myself in the mirror, face weary but resolute. Peter was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with an old newspaper. I gave him a few simple instructions, as had become our routine over the days living together. "Peter, I'll be gone a few hours. If you get hungry, there are sandwiches in the fridge. And remember to take your cough medicine." He nodded, his eyes fixed on me intently. I picked up my briefcase and was about to leave when he suddenly spoke. "Julian, may I come with you?" I froze, my hand unconsciously tightening on the doorknob. A flash of surprise surged through me. Did he want to accompany me to my family's will reading? Peter offered no explanation. His face remained calm, betraying no emotion, as if he had suggested something completely ordinary. My heart beat faster. Was he that curious about my family's will? But I didn't press. I was either afraid of the answer or already willing to trust him. I simply nodded. "All right, Peter, but my family won't be happy about it." He stood up, putting on the coat I had bought him the previous week. "I know, but I need to go." We took a taxi to the law office, a tall glass building in downtown Chicago where the air always carried the scent of money and power. On the way, I was silent, mentally preparing for the inevitable reactions. Peter sat beside me, gazing out the window as if he were accustomed to such situations. I wondered what he was thinking. Why was he so intent on coming? When we entered the conference room, the already tense atmosphere instantly froze solid. The entire Ross family was present. My parents at the head of the table, Uncle Gregory and Aunt Susan beside them, cousins scattered around with expectant faces. Lawyer Hargrove sat in the center, a thick file in front of him. All eyes turned to us, and then widened in shock upon recognizing the man beside me as the homeless elder who had appeared at the funeral. Their expressions shifted from surprise to fury, as if a bomb had just exploded. My father, Alan Ross, shot to his feet, face flushed red, pointing at Peter. "What the hell is this? Julian, why did you bring this vagrant here? This is my father's will reading, not a place for someone like him. Who is he to set foot in here? This is an insult to the family, defiling everything." His voice boomed, full of anger and contempt, as if Peter were an indelible stain. My mother, Susan Ross, did not stand, but her gaze was ice cold. "Julian, are you deliberately causing trouble? Bringing someone so low to a place like this? What kind of ridiculous stunt is this? Do you want to tarnish the family's honor by turning a solemn occasion into a circus? It's shameful." Her voice was shrill, laced with insinuation, as if I were a traitor. Uncle Gregory, my father's younger brother, chimed in with a sarcastic smirk. "Oh, our dear nephew knows how to draw attention with new friends. What's the point of bringing this old man here to stage a touching drama? This is a serious legal proceeding, not some cheap Hollywood movie. Do you think we'll applaud you?" He sneered, eyeing Peter from head to toe with disdain. Aunt Susan, my father's sister, added, "Exactly, Julian. You're turning everything into a joke. Him, a homeless man, what's he doing here? Or do you think the will includes a share for beggars? It's laughable." She shook her head, her tone dripping with mockery. My cousins were unrestrained, hurling venomous remarks. Cousin Mark whispered loudly, "Look at that. He's probably here to beg for money, or hoping for a few spare coins from this family. Julian, you've lost your mind." Cousin Lisa giggled. "From the funeral to Grandpa's will reading, you always manage to embarrass the family." Their words cut like knives, venomous, making the conference room suffocating. Amid the wave of criticism and scorn, Peter stood silently beside me, neither reacting nor defending himself. His gaze was calm, as if the words had nothing to do with him. He did not tremble or bow his head. He stood straight, hands hanging loosely like a stone statue in a storm. I admired that composure, but my heart raced wildly. Why didn't he say anything? What was the secret waiting for? Finally, Lawyer Hargrove spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, under legal provisions, as long as the person named in the will consents, Mr. Peter Ross's presence is entirely lawful. We should proceed to avoid wasting time." The entire room fell instantly silent. I too froze for a moment. Peter's name was in the will, something even I hadn't known beforehand. The family's eyes still blazed with anger, but now mixed with confusion as they realized his presence was no coincidence. In that brief moment, it felt as if time in the room had stretched. No one spoke. No one moved. Just eyes meeting and then quickly averting, as if each person was privately reevaluating what they had always taken for granted. Peter remained motionless beside me, his demeanor unnaturally calm, completely detached from the tension spreading throughout the room. His serenity only added to my confusion, for clearly things were unfolding far beyond my knowledge and preparation. I chose silence, neither defending nor explaining. I let the family's emotions and prejudices expose themselves like cracks in their perfect facade. My heart pounded, anxiously waiting. The official reading of the will was about to begin, and I knew the real storm was coming. The conference room seemed to shrink, the air thick with the scent of old paper and cold coffee. Lawyer Hargrove, a middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses and a light gray suit, cleared his throat lightly to draw attention. He opened the thick file in front of him, the pages rustling like my grandfather's final whispers. Everyone fell silent, eyes fixed on him, except for Peter, who stood calmly beside me as if he had known everything all along. I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed, but my hands gripped the armrests tightly, nails digging into my palms. This was the decisive moment. My grandfather's legacy, not just money, but an entire empire, a family, and perhaps secrets I wasn't ready to face. Lawyer Hargrove began, his voice steady and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Norman Ross's will was drafted 1 year ago, witnessed by 2 independent parties and duly notarized. Mr. Norman explicitly designated that full authority over the distribution of his estate, including personal assets, corporate shares, and investments, be granted to one individual. Mr. Peter Ross. The entire room fell deathly silent. Time seemed to stop. I felt that stillness, no sighs, no whispers. Everyone's eyes shifted from the lawyer to Peter and back again, as if their minds were struggling to process the information. Peter Ross? The homeless old man my family had driven away at the funeral? The man standing right beside me. My heart pounded wildly, a wave of dizziness hit me. I was stunned, my mouth dry, unable to speak. This wasn't a joke. The lawyer spoke seriously, and Peter merely bowed his head slightly as if acknowledging it. The Ross family was in shock, their faces contorted in disbelief. My father, Alan, opened his mouth to speak but closed it again, eyes bulging. My mother, Susan, clutched her handkerchief until her knuckles turned white. Uncle Gregory muttered, "What the hell is going on? Who is this Peter Ross guy?" Aunt Susan shook her head frantically as if trying to shake off a nightmare. My cousins looked at each other, mouths agape in confusion. The tension was so thick I could hear my own heart beating. Thump, thump, like war drums before battle. At that moment, Peter stepped forward to face my family. He stood tall, his clouded eyes now gleaming with quiet strength. "I am Peter Ross," he said, his voice deep and resolute. "The biological younger brother of Norman Ross. I left the family decades ago, choosing my own path. But my brother, Norman, never forgot me. And now, in accordance with his wishes, I will carry out the distribution of his estate." His words exploded in my mind like a bomb. Biological brother? My grandfather had a brother. Why had I never heard of him? Was this why he insisted on coming with me? I looked at Peter. The invisible bond from our days living together now felt clearer than ever. But mixed with it was anxiety. What would he announce next? Peter opened the file, his voice steady as if reading a business report rather than a will that would alter the fate of an entire family. "In accordance with my brother Norman Ross's wishes, I will now announce the estate distribution. First, Julian Ross, Norman's grandson, will inherit full operational control of Ross Steel and Logistics. This includes controlling shares, strategic decision-making authority, and all company-related assets." I froze. Inherit full control. Me, a corporate strategy analyst running the empire my grandfather built? Joy mixed with fear surged through me, but Peter wasn't finished. "However, there is a condition. Julian must directly manage the company for the next 5 years. He may not sell, transfer, or delegate control to any other family member. During that period, all major strategic decisions must be consulted upon and overseen by me, Peter Ross. If any condition is violated, the inheritance will be immediately revoked, and full controlling shares will transfer to a trust managed by me." His words made me tremble. Oversight by Peter? He, the long-lost brother, would be the gatekeeper of my grandfather's legacy? I looked at him and he gave me a slight nod as if to reassure me, but the family reacted differently. The initial silence gave way to chaos. The room's atmosphere shattered like an overinflated balloon pricked by a needle. My father, Alan, completely lost control. He slammed his fist on the table, the sharp bang startling everyone. "What the hell is this? Manipulation. This is will tampering. Peter Ross is my father's brother. How can he prove that? And Julian, my own son. taking advantage of my father's weakness to seize the inheritance. This is a conspiracy. I won't accept this will. His face was flushed red, veins bulging on his neck, voice shaking with rage. I looked at my father, my heart twisting. He was once someone I respected, but now his greed was fully exposed. My mother, Susan, remained colder, but her words were sharp as knives. This is utterly absurd. I reject the legality of this entire decision. It's a shameful setup, an insult to the Ross family. A homeless man, brother or not, daring to decide our estate. Julian, you knew about this, didn't you? You sided with him to betray the family. Her gaze swept over me, full of disappointment and hatred, making me feel stabbed. My uncles and aunts joined in unison, voices overlapping in chaos. Uncle Gregory stood up, pointing at Peter. I deny the blood relation. How can he prove he's the brother? This is fraud. I demand this reading be halted immediately. Aunt Susan screamed. Call our own lawyers now. We can't let this continue. A homeless nobody suddenly appears to divide the Ross fortune. It's ridiculous. My cousins didn't hold back, openly attacking me. Cousin Mark sneered. Julian, you're a traitor. Siding with an outsider to steal the inheritance? You think you deserve it? We're family and you sold us out. Lisa added. Exactly. He must have been conspiring with this old man for ages, taking everything for himself. We won't let this slide. Amid that storm, Lawyer Hargrove was forced to raise his voice to overpower the noise. Ladies and gentlemen, please calm down. The will was executed legally with full documentation, witnesses, and medical verification of Mr. Norman's soundness of mind at signing. It cannot be overturned by emotional reactions. Any disputes must go through the courts. But the Ross family wasn't listening. My father stood, pointing at Peter and me. We'll sue. We demand the court invalidate his distribution rights and strip Julian's inheritance. This isn't over. Everyone nodded in agreement, eyes filled with hostility. Peter remained silent, but I sensed his strength. He didn't need to argue because the truth was on his side. The will reading ended in extreme tension. People left, but two opposing sides had clearly formed from that moment. One was my family, full of anger and scheming, and the other was Peter and me, standing in the eye of the storm. I looked at him, heart still racing. You're my grandfather's brother? He nodded. Yes, Julian. And now we have to face them. On the way home, my head buzzed with thoughts. Inheriting the company? With oversight conditions? I remembered my grandfather once saying, a true legacy is responsibility, not power. Was this his final test? The anxiety didn't subside because I knew the battle had only just begun. We sat in the taxi rolling through the bustling streets of Chicago, but inside the vehicle it was silent as a grave. Peter sat beside me, gazing out the window with distant eyes, while I was immersed in a whirlwind of chaotic thoughts. Neither of us spoke a word throughout the long ride, only the hum of the engine and the faint honking of distant cars. The atmosphere was heavy, like a dark cloud hanging overhead, yet strangely it wasn't tense. It felt like the silence before a storm, deceptive calm filled with questions piling up inside. I glanced at Peter, the old man who I now knew was my uncle, and wondered what he was thinking. As for me, my mind spun with images from the conference room. My father's flushed face, my mother's cold denials, the shouting from my uncles and aunts, and the hostile glares from my cousins. They would sue, that was certain. But why was Peter so calm? Had he known all along? The thought made my heart beat faster, a surge of anxiety mixed with fear rising within me. The family war, something I had always avoided, was now hurtling toward me like a runaway train. When the taxi stopped in front of my apartment building, I paid the fare and led Peter inside. My familiar little home now felt strangely different, as if it were awaiting a secret about to be unveiled. I closed the door. The click of the lock echoed in the quiet space. Peter sat on the sofa and sighed softly, while I could no longer hold back my pent-up questions. I turned to him, my voice slightly trembling. I really don't understand. Why did my grandfather do this? Are you truly his brother? And the will? Why were you given such authority? Please tell me. I need to know the truth. Peter looked at me. His clouded eyes now sparkled with a touch of warmth. He gave a faint smile, sad but sincere. All right, Julian. It's time I told you the whole truth. No more avoiding it. Sit down, young man. This is a long story, but you deserve to know it. I sat across from him, my heart pounding like war drums. The room's atmosphere grew warmer from the soft glow of the table lamp, but the anxiety still hung in the air. Peter took a deep breath, as if gathering memories from a distant past, then began to speak, his voice deep and slow, guiding me into an old dusty book. More than 30 years ago, Julian, your grandfather, Norman, and I co-owned and directly ran Ross Steel and Logistics. Back then, the company was just a small steel workshop on the outskirts of Chicago, not the empire it is today. Norman was the chairman, embodying strength and decisiveness, while I was vice chairman, primarily responsible for long-term strategy. We were blood brothers, raised together in a poor family, and the dream of building a great company had bound us tightly. I pictured the scene. Two young brothers working tirelessly in a sweltering steel shop, the air thick with the smell of metal and sweat. My grandfather had often spoken of those hard early days, but he had never mentioned a brother. Why? Peter continued. I was the planner, Julian. Most of the critical decisions that helped the company expand and survive tough times came from strategies I developed. We grew from a small workshop into a logistics supply chain, signing contracts with major steel industry players. The sleepless nights calculating risks and forecasting markets, that was my work. Norman trusted me completely. We were like two wheels on the same machine. His voice grew deeper, as if entering a darker part. But then a major conflict erupted. We disagreed profoundly on the path forward. Norman wanted expansion at any cost, sometimes sacrificing ethics, people, and honesty to gain an edge in power struggles. He was willing to cut costs by laying off workers or signing shady deals with partners to outmaneuver competitors. I couldn't stomach it. I saw the business world as full of scheming, where relationships could be exploited and betrayed for profit. Those meetings where people smiled to your face but stabbed you in the back, I despised it all. I listened, my heart racing. So my grandfather wasn't always the perfect man I had imagined. Peter paused, sipping water, his eyes distant as if reliving the memories. I argued with Norman many times. We can't build on lies, I told him. But Norman said it was the law of survival. In the end, I decided to leave everything behind. I resigned, severed all rights and benefits, and walked away. I accepted a life without status or wealth to keep my freedom. I became a wanderer, living here and there with just a backpack and free thoughts. I was stunned. Peter, the vice chairman of a major corporation, chose homelessness? Why didn't you stay and fight? I asked, voice trembling. He smiled sadly. Because I realized, Julian, status can be lost overnight, but character only reveals itself when there's nothing left to hide it. Those years of homelessness taught me that. I encountered both the dark and true sides of people, the wealthy who scorned me, but also the poor who shared their bread. I slept under bridges, begged on street corners, and observed the world from the bottom. That was true freedom, unbound by money or power. I learned to live needing nothing but myself. His memories painted a picture, a younger Peter leaving a luxurious office, stepping into a rainy Chicago night, coat soaked but heart light. The anxiety in me built. This was only the beginning. Peter went on. Later, Norman realized his mistake. He sought me out many times, persuading me to return to the company, but I firmly refused. I only agreed to give discreet advice when needed, through secret meetings in roadside cafes or handwritten letters. I didn't want to return to that vortex. Then he spoke of their final meeting, his voice catching slightly. 1 year before he passed, Norman came to me one last time. He was frail, but his eyes were still sharp. Peter, I'm going soon, he said. I need you to objectively evaluate every family member. Who is worthy of carrying the legacy I built my whole life? I was surprised, but agreed. Norman gave me full authority over the estate distribution, trusting that only I, unbound by family ties or interests, could make a clear-headed decision. I froze. So everything had been planned. "So your appearance at the funeral?" I whispered, voice breaking. Peter nodded. "Not coincidental, Julian. It was the final test. I showed up at the funeral to observe, to see everyone's reactions. Who would drive me away, who would accept me? And you chose correctly. I had been quietly watching for a long time through discreet reports from Norman. You were the only one not blinded by power." His words made me tremble. The funeral where I stepped forward to defend him had been a test. My grandfather had orchestrated it all through Peter. Anxiety surged, mixed with emotion. "Grandfather, he trusted me that much?" I asked, tears rolling down. Peter placed a hand on my shoulder. "Yes. And now, you must prove it." The story stretched late into the night, rich with vivid details of the past. I listened, imagining my grandfather and a young Peter arguing in the office, Peter wandering in the rain, Norman secretly meeting his brother. Each detail built the drama, making my heart race. This wasn't just the past. It was the key to the future. And I knew the coming battle with the family would be fiercer than ever. The days following the will reading passed in a deceptive calm, like the lull before a storm. I returned to my daily routine, but my mind buzzed constantly with thoughts of the corporation, the will, and Peter, the uncle I had only just discovered. He continued staying at my apartment, no longer as a guest but as a close family member, a quiet advisor. We talked more about business, about life, and gradually I began mentally preparing for what was to come. My family, my parents, uncles and aunts, cousins, they were not the type to let go easily. They had declared they would sue, and I knew it wasn't an empty threat. Every evening as I sat at the kitchen table with Peter, I wondered, what will they do? And how will I handle it? That anxiety made my sleep fitful, as if I were waiting for a time bomb to explode. Then it came, sooner than I expected. Just about 2 weeks after the will reading, on a dreary morning with light drizzle, a doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a process server standing there, his face impassive under a soaked cap. He handed me a thick envelope stamped clearly with the court seal. "Summons for Mr. Julian Ross and Mr. Peter Ross," he said flatly, like reading a weather report. I took it, my heart pounding, and went back inside. Peter was sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee cup, as if he had been expecting this moment. I handed him the envelope, my voice slightly trembling. "They've sued. The plaintiffs are my parents, along with Uncle Gregory, Aunt Susan, and the cousins." Peter opened the envelope, scanned the documents, and nodded calmly. I knew it. This was inevitable. He showed no panic, no anger, just composure, like reading an old business report. I felt a flicker of surprise, but not panic. I had anticipated it from the stories Peter told about the family's past. They always saw power as everything, and now they felt deprived. "What are the accusations?" I asked, sitting across from him. Peter slid the papers over. "Will tampering, questioning Norman's mental capacity, and claiming I'm a fraud. They want to invalidate the entire distribution." I skimmed through, the dry legal language laced with venom. Peter Ross, imposter. Julian Ross, exploiting Mr. Norman Ross. My heart twisted. This was my family, the people who had hugged me as a child, now turning against me like enemies. But Peter placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, Julian. This trial isn't about emotions. It's where truth and law speak for themselves. We'll prepare." In the following days, Peter guided me like a mentor. He pulled out from his old suitcase files prepared years in advance, proof of blood relation, family meeting minutes, handwritten letters from my grandfather. "Norman foresaw everything," he said, voice warm and steady. He knew how the family would react, so he prepared irrefutable evidence. We spent hours reviewing the documents, medical records proving my grandfather's soundness of mind when drafting the will, witnesses from the old lawyer, even my grandfather's personal diary. Peter emphasized, "Stay calm, Julian. They'll attack emotionally, but we have the law. This is a test of your resolve." I nodded, but anxiety surged inside. I imagined the trial, hostile glares from the family, harsh accusations from their lawyer. "Are you afraid of the upcoming trial?" I asked one evening as rain pattered against the window. Peter looked up at me, a faint smile curving his lips, not scornful but understanding. "I've been wandering for nearly 30 years, Julian," he said slowly. "I lost everything people consider important long ago. Compared to that time, a trial that lasts just one day is nothing." He paused, his gaze growing more serious as he looked straight at me. "But you're different. You're not just facing them. You're stepping into a position many will rely on. The company needs you clear-headed and steady. Don't let fear make you forget what you're standing up for." The trial day arrived under a gray Chicago sky, the wind cutting like a knife. The federal courthouse in the city center, a majestic granite building with towering columns and marble hallways. I wore a black suit, tie knotted tight, heart pounding as I entered the courtroom. Peter walked beside me, composed as if out for a stroll. Inside, my family filled the plaintiff's side, my father stern-faced, my mother icy, Uncle Gregory whispering to their lawyer, Aunt Susan clutching her purse, cousins glaring at me with hatred. The tension was immediate, like an overinflated balloon about to burst. The judge, a middle-aged woman with black-rimmed glasses, gavels the session to order. The plaintiff's lawyer, a tall man with a booming voice, opened with a barrage of accusations against Peter and me. Dramatically, he declared, "Your Honor, this will is the product of manipulation. Mr. Norman Ross, in his frail old age, was influenced by Peter Ross, an unexpectedly appearing homeless man, and Julian Ross, the grandson who exploited his weakened state after the funeral to seize the inheritance." He painted me as a weak, manipulated figure grieving after the funeral, and Peter as a sudden opportunist aiming to grab wealth. Peter Ross is not the biological brother, just an imposter. And Julian lacks qualification. He has never managed the company, only an analyst. His words cut like knives, tightening my chest. I glanced at my family, my father nodding in agreement, my mother looking at me with disappointment, Uncle Gregory smirking. Anxiety peaked, sweat beading on my forehead. But Peter stood calmly. "Your Honor, I have full legal documentation prepared years in advance." He presented proof of kinship, birth certificates, DNA tests, authorization documents from my grandfather, and evidence of the will's drafting process. "These are Norman's handwritten letters confirming I am his biological brother, and he entrusted me because he trusted my judgment." Our lawyer, representing my grandfather's estate, Mr. Hargrove, added professionally, "The will was executed while he was of sound mind and legally valid. There are witnesses, 2 independent lawyers, and clear medical records from Mr. Norman's personal physician. No signs of coercion or manipulation exist. Here is the medical report. Mr. Norman was healthy, with no cognitive decline. Then it was my turn. As the primary heir, I stood, voice slightly trembling but firm. "Your Honor, I have evidence of past misconduct by the family." I presented the documents Peter had prepared, internal emails, meeting minutes, financial reports, proving attempts at internal power manipulation, conflicts of interest, and decisions harming the company for personal gain. Uncle Gregory once pressured my grandfather to sign backdoor contracts to misuse company funds. My mother interfered in personnel to favor relatives, leading to millions in losses. This isn't a will dispute. It's protecting my grandfather's legacy from those who have harmed it. The plaintiffs tried to counter, but their arguments were weak and disjointed. Their lawyer stammered, "These documents could be forged." But faced with specific, consistent evidence, notarized papers, living witnesses, they couldn't deny the will's legality. The Ross family members began showing clear unease and tension. My father gripped the chair arms, face pale. My mother whispered to Uncle Gregory, eyes darting. Aunt Susan bit her lip. Cousins exchanged worried glances. I saw it clearly. The trial was turning completely against them. My heart raced, anxiety mixed with relief. We were winning. After deliberation, the judge gavels. The court rules in absolute favor of Peter Ross and Julian Ross. The will's full legal validity and executed estate distribution are upheld. Her words echoed like a bomb in the room. My family froze in shock, then erupted. My father shot up. "This is injustice." But the judge shook her head, adjourning the session. Immediately after the verdict, my parents turned to me, faces full of rage. My father said loudly, voice shaking, "Julian, from today we disown you. You are no longer our son." My mother added coldly, "You chose to side with a stranger. Never come back." My uncles, aunts, and cousins expressed bitter resentment. Uncle Gregory called me a traitor. Aunt Susan turned away. "We'll appeal." Cousins looked at me like an enemy. I remained silent, accepting the severance as the price for choosing truth. My heart ached, but I felt no regret. On the way home, rain still fell, but my heart felt lighter. The legal battle was over, but I knew the family wounds would take far longer to heal. The anxiety now shifted to concern for the future. The company awaited me with Peter by my side. But deep down, I felt my grandfather's strength. Through Peter, through the will, through this final test. The weeks following the trial passed amid a tedious stream of legal formalities, like a slow-moving river that could not be stopped. I signed stacks of documents, met with lawyer Hargrove to finalize the transfer of power, and gradually, everything became official. Ross Steel and Logistics, the empire my grandfather had built from nothing, was now mine. I remember my first day stepping into the CEO's office. The spacious room with its polished oak desk, my grandfather's portrait hanging on the wall, and the view overlooking the glittering Chicago River under the sunlight. My heart pounded, not from joy but from the immense pressure. Insiders watched me closely. Senior executives whispered behind my back, wondering if the inheriting grandson had what it took. External partners called incessantly, probing like hawks waiting for an opportunity. I felt as if I were standing on a cliff edge, wind howling, where one wrong step could drag the entire company into the abyss. But Peter was there, reminding me, "Slow and steady, Julian, don't rush. The most impatient ones are usually those waiting for you to stumble." In those early days, I proactively invited Peter to return to the company in an official role. We sat at our familiar cafe near home, the warm aroma of espresso filling the air, and I spoke directly. "You should come back, as vice chairman or whatever title you want. It's the recognition you deserve for everything you contributed. The company needs you, the strategic mind my grandfather once relied on." I looked at him, hope flickering in my eyes, knowing he was the key to keeping me from getting lost in this business labyrinth. Peter listened, sipping his black unsweetened coffee, then shook his head gently. "Thank you, Julian. But I don't want to return to the vortex of titles and power that I left behind. I lived as a wanderer for 30 years to avoid it. The endless meetings, the fake smiles, the decisions that compromise one's conscience. I don't need a title to exist." His words stunned me, though they weren't surprising. He was always like that, serene, without greed. My heart beat faster, a touch of worry creeping in. Without him in an official position, how would I manage? But then he continued, "However, I'll stand behind you, as a strategic advisor on personnel and corporate culture. I'll offer perspectives and warnings when needed, but the final decisions will always be yours to own. That's the best way, unbound, just companionship." I respected his choice, filled with gratitude. Peter remained by my side, unbound by any benefits or titles. He took no salary, needed no private office, just late-night calls or discreet meetings at my home, where he analyzed financial reports or suggested ways to handle personnel. "You are the successor, Julian," he said one evening as we sat by the faux fireplace, flames flickering. "I'm only the guide. Don't depend on me. Learn to stand on your own." His words made me anxious, for I knew the real challenges lay ahead. Not the courtroom, but leading a massive corporation through market storms. Under my new leadership, I began a thorough review of the company's operations. In the early days, I stayed up all night with towering stacks of files, analyzing every expense line and contract. I prioritized transparency. No more shadowy funds, no more distorted reports. Long-term stability over short-term profits. I canceled several high-risk projects the old family had pushed, instead investing in green technology and sustainable supply chains. And people as the core value. I remembered my grandfather's words. To keep the company, you must first keep the people. When they leave, everything else follows. I held company-wide meetings, listening to input from lower-level employees, something rare before. My heart raced each time I stood before hundreds of faces, anxious whether they would trust me or just see me as the spoiled heir. My first personnel decisions focused on retaining the core team. I dismissed a few senior managers loyal to the old family, those who had formed factions favoring relatives over talent. We no longer operate on family mechanisms, I declared in a board meeting, voice firm despite my slightly trembling hands. All decisions are based on competence and contribution. I ended factional favoritism. No more promotions due to kinship, no more bonuses based on connections. I sensed the tension in the air. Some employees worried, whispering about a purge. But I knew it was necessary. Anxiety surged. Would they rebel? Would the stock plummet? Peter supported me quietly from behind, helping me spot entrenched weaknesses in the corporate culture that had persisted for years. He analyzed, "This company was poisoned by greed, Julian. Employees feared speaking truth for fear of losing their jobs. Build trust. Start with small things." He suggested training programs and anonymous feedback channels, and I implemented them. One evening he called, "There's a manager in logistics hiding supply chain vulnerabilities. Check it." I did, and uncovered it, saving the company from a major loss. His support was like a lighthouse in the fog, filling me with boundless gratitude. Employees gradually noticed the substantive changes. No more vague top-down orders, no more internal political pressure, where everyone worried about factions. Instead, transparent meetings, performance-based rewards, and I listened to input from all levels. One afternoon, Mr. Harris, a longtime employee in production, stopped me in the hallway. He looked at me, voice slow but sincere. "Julian, this is the first time I've truly felt heard. No more worrying about who's related to whom." Those simple words warmed my heart, but also made me more anxious than ever. Because I understood that trust once given demands great responsibility to maintain. From moments like that, trust began forming within the company, spreading quietly like an undercurrent. Support for me came not from the inheritance title, but from specific choices in leadership. Like when I rejected a plan to cut employee salaries for cost reduction, instead optimizing operations to retain both people and efficiency. Raw steel and logistics entered a new beginning phase. Not flashy or ostentatious, but steadier and more clearly directed than ever. Stock prices stabilized, partners signed new contracts, and the press wrote about the revival under young leadership. But I knew challenges remained. Volatile markets, fierce competition. The first months under my leadership passed like a lucid dream, filled with small but meaningful achievements. Revenue gradually increased. Employees smiled more in the hallways, and meetings were no longer as tense as before. I began to feel more confident, as if my grandfather were somewhere, patting my shoulder in encouragement. Peter continued serving as my strategic advisor. Our late-night conversations helped me see the long-term strategy more clearly. "You're doing well. The company stock is rising steadily," he said one afternoon as we sat on the office balcony watching the traffic below on the streets of Chicago. "But don't get complacent. Success always attracts envy." His words were a vague warning, making my heart skip a beat. I nodded, but inwardly thought the old family lost the lawsuit. They wouldn't dare do anything more, would they? I was wrong. As the company began to recover and grow steadily, first quarter sales exceeding projections by 12%, stock prices rising gently, the old family refused to accept defeat. They quietly launched sabotage efforts like shadows lurking in the dark. At first, I didn't notice. Just small signs like an article in a local financial paper headlined, "New Leadership at Ross Steel. Talent or Inherited Luck." The piece exaggerated internal risks, implying I lacked experience and that the company was hiding financial issues. I read it with my heart pounding, wondering who had leaked the information. Then rumors spread. On industry forums, anonymous posts appeared about internal divisions at Ross Steel, with fabricated details of mass employee departures. I felt anxiety rising, like an undercurrent swelling. It wasn't just rumors. Some in the old family connected with disgruntled insiders. I discovered this when a mid-level manager, once loyal to Uncle Gregory, suddenly resigned and took sensitive documents. He stirred division through anonymous emails to employees. The new leadership is cutting staff. The company is about to collapse. During negotiations for a major supplier contract, information was disrupted. Someone leaked distorted data, making the partner doubt our transparency. I sat in my office, gripping the phone tightly, listening to reports from the team. "Mr. Julian, the contract is at risk of delay. They say they've heard our internals are in chaos. They even linked up with competitors." I learned this through a reliable source. My father, Alan, had met a representative from Steel Dynamics, a major rival, in a discreet bar. They provided selectively edited internal documents, deliberately distorting the truth. An old financial report altered to look like we were hiding vulnerabilities, or internal emails taken out of context to prove my incompetence. Those documents were circulated covertly, sowing doubt among partners. One morning, I opened my email to see a Wall Street Journal article. "Ross Steel facing leadership crisis?" My heart raced wildly, cold sweat breaking out. This wasn't random. It was a deliberate campaign from people who were once my blood. Under this wave of covert attacks, the company entered a turbulent phase. Many clients and partners grew cautious, delaying collaborations. A major logistics contract was postponed indefinitely, citing the need for further review. Stock prices dropped 8% in just 2 weeks. Shareholders panicked, calling nonstop, "Julian, what's going on? Is the company stable?" Some employees feared an uncertain future, whispering during breaks, "If the new boss can't hold on, what will happen to us?" Though I had anticipated this scenario through Peter's warnings, the reality still kept me awake with anxiety. I sat alone in the office late at night, staring at the red stock charts on the screen, wondering, do I have the strength to withstand this? Or will the old family win? Peter reassured me during an urgent meeting at home. He sat across from me, voice calm as always. "Julian, rebuilding an empire is never without thorns. These blows are the true test of your mettle. They're desperate because they know you're doing the right thing. Don't panic, act." His words were like medicine, slowing my racing heart. Together, we mapped out a clear counter-strategy. First, trace the information leaks. I formed an internal team to check emails, calls, and track disgruntled individuals. Second, strengthen contract legality. Lawyer Hargrove was called back to draft tighter confidentiality clauses. Third, proactively be transparent with major partners. I decided to hold online meetings, publicly sharing real data to quash rumors. I executed step by step like a silent battle. Cut off internal links. After the investigation, we uncovered 3 employees connected to the old family. One, a distant cousin who had been favored in the past. I called them into the office, voice firm but not harsh. "From today, Ross Steel is no longer the place for you." They left and I felt anxiety as I signed the termination papers, but I knew it was necessary. Then publicly release verified data. I held an online press conference presenting actual financial reports to prove stability. "The rumors spread in recent days are all fabricated," I said, heart racing but voice steady. "We are transparent and here is the evidence." With shareholders, I proactively engaged, personally calling major ones, explaining each step. "We are stronger than ever. Trust me." The covert attacks gradually crumbled. The smear campaigns lost effect as truth emerged. Negative articles refuted with data. Partners returned to sign contracts after seeing transparency. One major partner, previously hesitant, emailed, "Thank you for your candor, Julian. Let's continue our partnership." Stock prices began recovering. Shareholders sighed in relief. Employees whispered, "Our new boss really has what it takes." Seeing the tide turning, I realized the moment for counterattack was near. My heart pounded with excitement. Not fear anymore, but thrill. The real battle was entering its decisive phase. Peter smiled when I told him, "You see? Truth always wins. Now prepare for the final blow." I nodded, ready. In the nights that followed, I planned, envisioning how to turn the tables. The old family had fought dirty. Now it was my turn to defend my grandfather's legacy justly. We began our counterattack in a calculated manner. Not noisy like public disputes, but quietly, striking at each critical link. Peter and I sat in my home office late one evening, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the stack of old files he pulled from his worn leather suitcase. He had kept them for years, documents my grandfather had entrusted to him or that he had gathered during his discreet advisory sessions. "This is the time to use them," Peter said, his voice deep and resolute. My heart beat faster as he handed me the old files one by one, related to the shady decisions from the period when my parents, uncles, and aunts had deeply interfered in the company's operations. I remember that moment clearly, Peter opening a thick yellowed folder and pointing to the densely written lines. "Look here, Julian. In 2015, your father, Alan, pressured Norman to sign a steel supply contract with a shell company owned by Uncle Gregory. They transferred $2 million under the guise of consulting fees, but it was actually a conflict of interest since the company was secretly family-owned. Norman knew, but he was under pressure from family ties. I skimmed through it, my chest tightening. The numbers, signatures, internal emails, all clear but previously hidden under the veil of family decisions. I imagined my grandfather sitting alone in his office, sighing over demands from his children, and wondered why he hadn't told me sooner. Anxiety surged. These weren't just papers, they were evidence that could dismantle an entire system of greed. From there, I ordered a full review of all transactions, contracts, and cash flows involving the old family. I formed a trusted internal team, including lawyer Hargrove and a few analysts Peter recommended, to dig deep into digital archives and old paper records. Long nights awake in the office, computer screens glowing with Excel spreadsheets and bank reports made my eyes sting. We uncovered prolonged misconduct that had been cleverly concealed. An unexplained $500,000 transfer from the company's contingency fund to my mother Susan's personal account, disguised as family charitable support. Or logistics contracts with Aunt Susan's close associates, where prices were inflated by 20% to skim hidden commissions. Each discovery made my heart race, not from anger, but from the drama of the truth emerging. "This is clear conflict of interest," Hargrove said calmly. They treated the company like their personal playground. The unexplained transfers, conflicts of interest, and backdoor contracts were gradually peeled away, layer by layer. I sat alone in the office late at night, cold wind from the Chicago River blowing through the open window, reviewing old emails. My father writing to my grandfather, "Dad, this is a good opportunity for the family. Don't worry about the details." But those details were now ironclad evidence. Peter was there, guiding me. "Don't reveal everything at once. Choose the timing, strike the weak points." We analyzed each link, from bank accounts to involved partners, and anxiously awaited the moment to turn the tables. I imagined my parents' faces when everything came to light and wondered if they would regret it. It wasn't revenge, but the pain from the family severance still smoldered inside me. In parallel, I proactively provided verified information to major partners and market oversight agencies. I didn't want noise, no flashy press conferences, no public accusations, but private letters with legal documents attached. To a logistics partner who had hesitated due to rumors, I called directly. "I know false information has been spreading. Here is the actual report, and here is evidence of its source. My voice was steady, though my heart pounded. Market oversight agencies like the SEC received anonymous dossiers from us detailing potential violations of competition laws. Peter advised, "Let them investigate themselves. We only provide the truth." Each sent email made me anxious. Would they believe it? Would the plan backfire? As the evidence was clarified and released through proper channels, a chain reaction began. Partners who had covertly cooperated with the old family, like Steel Dynamics, immediately cut ties. I received an email from their CEO. "We want no association with any lack of transparency. Cancel the agreement effective immediately." The sabotage plans crumbled link by link. A supplier withdrew from a contract. A bank froze related accounts for investigation. I sat monitoring it on the screen, heart racing as if watching a thriller. Peter smiled faintly. "You see? They dug their own graves." Excitement surged, not from joy at others' downfall, but because justice was unfolding. The reputation of my parents, uncles, and aunts plummeted rapidly. Media and financial circles collectively questioned their true roles in past shady contracts and opaque decisions. A Financial Times article. Former Ross Steel leaders suspected of internal manipulation, new evidence emerges. I read it with a heavy heart. My father, once someone I admired, now labeled greedy by everyone. A series of personal business dealings ended. Uncle Gregory's consulting firm lost major contracts. Aunt Susan's investment fund saw capital withdrawals. Some assets were temporarily frozen for review. Their vacation villa on the Chicago outskirts was sealed. Familiar cash flows from hidden investments cut off. For the first time, they truly faced financial crisis. I knew this from scattered sources. My father had to sell his prized luxury car to manage debts, while my mother quietly called old friends, lowering her voice to beg for help. Just imagining that scene tightened my chest, but I forced myself to stay clear-headed. This wasn't revenge, but the inevitable consequence of choices they had made long ago. The old family shifted from aggressive attack to panic and loss of control. They began blaming each other through leaked emails my team accessed via legal channels. Uncle Gregory scolded my father. "You promised this plan was foolproof. What now?" Aunt Susan whispered to a cousin. "It's all Julian's fault, that traitor." They made hasty decisions, trying to reconnect with old partners only to meet silence, or hiring new lawyers for appeals. But their arguments were disjointed, exposing more unhideable flaws, like an old contract unearthed, proving antitrust violations. I observed the entire process with clarity, sitting in the office with Peter, monitoring news and reports. "This isn't revenge," I whispered to him. "It's the inevitable outcome of choices they made long ago." Peter nodded. "Exactly. Your grandfather would be proud." By that point, the tide had completely turned, and the old family's collapse was no longer a possibility but inevitable. I received a call from the lawyer. "They're negotiating a settlement, but it's too late." My heart raced with anxiety, excitement that the company was safe, but sadness over the family loss. The counterattack was quiet but effective, like a chess game we had won through truth and patience. The days that followed passed in a deceptive calm, like the quiet after a storm. The atmosphere within the company gradually stabilized, like a ship that had weathered the tempest and found calm seas. Revenue began to rise again, stock prices recovered, and employees whispered about a true new beginning. I sat in my office, gazing out at the Chicago River sparkling under the afternoon sun, and wondered if everything was truly over. Peter was there as usual, sitting on the old sofa with a hot cup of tea. "What do you think they'll do next?" he asked calmly. I shook my head. "Maybe they'll give up, but I'm not sure." Anxiety still crept in, not fear, but waiting for an ending I couldn't yet envision. Then they came, on a dreary morning with light drizzle, when Chicago seemed shrouded in fog. The office doorbell rang and my secretary announced, "Mr. Julian, your parents and some relatives are waiting in the conference room." My heart tightened. They, The people who had once been my family, who had hugged me as a child, were now strangers after all the battles. I took a deep breath and entered the conference room with Peter following silently behind, his presence a solid support. My parents sat at the head of the table, flanked by Uncle Gregory and Aunt Susan. My cousins stood scattered, faces weary. Gone was the former arrogance or sharpness. Only exhaustion and unease remained after a string of defeats. My father, Alan, once tall and authoritative, now hunched with dark circles under his eyes. My mother, Susan, no longer had her cold gaze. Instead, worry was etched into new wrinkles. Uncle Gregory whispered something to Aunt Susan, voice trembling as if clinging to a last shred of composure. They arrived weary and drained. My father spoke first, voice hoarse and slow, devoid of the old commanding tone. "Julian, I was wrong. I won't make excuses anymore." He bowed his head, avoiding my eyes. "What we did, spreading rumors, pressuring you, colluding with competitors, all stemmed from fear and selfishness. I thought I was protecting the family, but I was only trying to hold on to control. Now I understand. It went too far." My mother continued, hands clasped tightly, voice trembling. "I know this apology comes too late. I know some things can't return to how they were. I just hope you know I regret it. Not because of the losses, but because I hurt my own son." Uncle Gregory spoke next, voice lowered. "We misjudged you, Julian. We thought we knew everything, but we were only seeing through our own fears. If we could go back, we wouldn't have chosen that path." My cousins in the back said little, just nodding silently, eyes filled with unease and fatigue, like people awakening from a long chain of mistakes. No one demanded anything more. Further words seemed unnecessary. I listened in silence, seeing them as people worn down by their own ambition and fear of losing power. My father, the man who once taught me to tie a tie as a child, now looked aged, hands trembling as he gripped his water glass. My mother, who had comforted me after arguments, now had red eyes from financial worry. Uncle Gregory and Aunt Susan, who had joked with me at family gatherings, now pale, clothes no longer impeccable. I imagined their recent nights, sleepless over frozen assets, plummeting reputations, calls from old friends turning away. My heart ached, not with anger but pity. They had once been pillars, but ambition had reduced them to shadows of themselves. Anxiety surged. Could I forgive? Was there a way back? After a heavy silence, I spoke, voice calm but resolute. "Mom, Dad, uncles, aunts, cousins, I've heard everything." I took a deep breath. I never sought revenge. I never wanted that. I don't want to continue this cycle of resentment in the family. I looked around the room at the familiar faces, now weary. All I want is to live my own life without fighting or envy. I'm tired of schemes, lies, and betrayals. My voice slowed. This company, grandfather's legacy, isn't for fighting over, it's for building. My father shifted slightly, lips moving as if to speak, but he stopped. I looked him straight in the eye. I choose to forgive, not because everything can be erased, but because I don't want to carry resentment forever. I paused. But I will set clear boundaries. I release the resentment, but I won't return to the old relationship that hurt me. My mother sobbed softly. I continued, not raising my voice, but leaving no ambiguity. No more meetings, no more interference, no more family in the old way. This is the only way I can live in peace. The room's atmosphere froze. My father bowed his head for a long time, voice breaking. "I understand. I no longer have the right to demand anything." My mother wiped her tears, whispering, "I just hope you're at peace. That's enough." Uncle Gregory murmured, as if to himself, "Perhaps this is the ending we chose." No one said more. They stood and left in silence without looking back. I stood still, watching their figures fade behind the glass doors, heart beating slowly with a deep sadness but no longer torn. Peter stepped forward, hand on my shoulder, voice deep and steady. "You've done the hardest thing." He continued slowly. "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strength of someone no longer controlled by the past." I nodded. Anxiety lingered, whether they would truly change. But I knew one thing. This decision was necessary, to close an old chapter and move forward without looking back. From then on, I devoted myself fully to developing raw steel and logistics in line with my grandfather's true wishes, steadfast on a path of sustainability and transparency. No more short-term decisions for profit. I invested in green technology, expanded eco-friendly supply chains, and prioritized employee welfare. In every meeting, I reminded the team, we build for the future, not the next quarter. The company grew strongly, revenue up 20% in the first year. But more importantly, employees took pride in their workplace. I often sat alone in my grandfather's old office, looking at his portrait and whispered, "I'm doing as you wished." Anxiety remained. Markets are always volatile. But now it was the anxiety of hope, not fear. Peter continued accompanying me as a quiet advisor, not directly involved, but always there when I needed a clear perspective. He didn't come to the office daily, just late calls or meetings at a riverside cafe, where he analyzed strategy in his warm, deep voice. "What do you think about expanding into Asia?" he asked once, and I listened, learning from his experience. Over time, I came to see Peter as a second grandfather, not by blood, but by trust and shared values. He taught me about character, about treating others without expecting gain. One afternoon as we walked in the park, he said, "Julian, power is temporary, but kindness is eternal." His words made me reflect, and our bond deepened, like two travelers crossing a desert together. One major decision I made was to allocate a stable portion of profits to build a free nursing home named after Norman Ross and Peter Ross. It was a way to close the past and give back something good. The idea emerged during a finance meeting. Looking at the profit figures, I thought of elders like Peter I had met on the streets with nowhere to go. "We'll build a place for them," I announced to the team. The nursing home rose on the outskirts of Chicago, with lush gardens, cozy rooms, and free services for elderly homeless people. Peter initially refused having his name on the sign. "I don't need recognition." But I persuaded him, "This is for grandfather and you, the two who taught me compassion." The home became a place Peter frequented, not as a founder, but as an ordinary elder finding peace. I saw him sitting under a tree chatting with other residents, and he smiled. "This is my new home now, Julian." My life with Peter grew simpler, without ostentation, no longer swept into power struggles. I sold the luxury car, kept the old apartment, spent time on books and long walks. Peter still wandered occasionally, but always returned with new stories. We no longer talked about money or power, just life, just people. One evening, as we chatted about work and life under the warm home light, I looked at Peter and recalled the entire journey. From grandfather's funeral and the hollow pain to the homeless elder driven away. From the chaotic will reading to the tense trial. From the dirty tactics to the quiet counterattack. Each moment was a scar, but also a lesson. My heart beat slowly with emotion. The anxiety of the past now transformed into present peace. In the end, I realized that neither money nor power defines a person's worth, but how they treat others when there's no benefit in return, especially the vulnerable. My grandfather taught me that through his will, Peter lived it through his wandering life, and now I applied it in every decision. From all I had endured, I understood that to protect true values and a healthy life, one must sometimes dare to stand up, dare to say no, and dare to accept losing relationships that exist only for gain. Not because they no longer matter, but because that bond had become a burden, dragging in fighting, suspicion, and prolonged hurt. The old family had once been an inseparable part of my life, but that very relationship had eroded my trust and peace over the years. Holding on to it was no longer duty, but self-harm. Letting go wasn't avoidance, it was the necessary choice to end a toxic cycle. Only by releasing it could I move forward lighter, focusing on building what truly matters, and finding the peace I had sacrificed so many years to seek. So if forced to choose between pleasing toxic relationships and preserving one's own peace, choose peace. For only by escaping fighting and blind ambition can one truly live a worthy life. I learned that through sleepless nights and hard decisions, and now, watching Peter smile over his tea, I knew I had chosen rightly. Our story, from loss to rebirth, wasn't an ending, but the beginning of a true legacy, compassion and peace.